Now to other news, and the 8 Republican US presidential hopefuls have faced off in their latest debate, with national security concerns on top of the agenda. In front of an audience of foreign policy experts, candidates have been probed on issues including domestic and border security, as well as foreign policy. The latest debate has put former House Speaker Newt Gingrich in the spotlight after a series of good opinion polls. For more, I was joined a short time ago by Professor Geoffrey Garrett from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Geoff Garrett, 6 weeks out from the start of voting, how important was this debate?
I don't think it was an important debate in terms of foreign policy. You know, it's not going to be a foreign policy election. It's a domestic policy and an economic policy election. But what I think the debate told us today is that Newt Gingrich, who was dead and buried 9 months ago, is back as a viable Republican nominee for president. And what that really tells me is that the Republican Party has an ABM strategy. Anybody but Mitt being Mitt Romney, they want to be their candidate.
Now, why is that?
The problem with Romney, who looks good, sounds good, has presidential hair, is that in 2008 he was a flip-flopper. He changed position. I was against it before I was for it, was the line. He's also a Mormon. Many Americans, particularly American conservatives, remain uncomfortable with Mormons. And probably biggest of all in this election, there's something called Romney Care. It's like Obamacare. When Romney was governor of Massachusetts, he did a health care reform that looks like the vilified Obamacare.
Do you think that the debate showed some points of difference between the different candidates?
Well, there were some differences, and you know, some of the sort of more interesting but marginal candidates. Ron Paul, the ultra-libertarian, you know, essentially saying that the Patriot Act is unpatriotic. That was quite a line. You know, there were differences there. I thought Mitt Romney went straight down the line with what you would expect a Republican to say. The same was more or less true for Newt Gingrich, with one exception. Gingrich said the US should have a humane immigration policy, which is code for doing something to allow the 11 million Latinos who are in the US illegally to stay in the US. That could hurt him in the Republican primaries, but it would probably help him in the general election if he became their candidate.
And so as we get closer to the vote, do you think that Newt Gingrich is the one who's going to start getting more support?
It's possible. You know, he came out of nowhere. 9 months ago, he was a candidate. It looked like he was a bad candidate because of a personal history, because he seemed too strident on many issues. He lost his campaign manager. He had no money. Then the Republican right has cycled through a whole series of candidates. You know, it's hard to remember them all. Donald Trump, Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, Herman Cain. They've all flamed out. So the right wing of the Republican Party is still looking for a true conservative, and that's why Newt Gingrich has resurfaced, not because he's got sort of incredibly strong presidential stuff.
And presumably the Obama administration would be quite pleased that the Republicans are having trouble finding a star. And Mitt Romney would be their greatest concern if he in the end gets to the front?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit complicated, isn't it? Because we've got to think about this. You know, you have to win the primary, then you have to win the general election. So I think what Romney hopes is that the Tea Party Republicans, the hardcore right of the party, continues to beat up on Obama over debt and deficits, and that he can then come in as the sensible centrist. Flip for Obama. Obama loves the fact that the Republican Party is at war with itself, and he wants that to go on and on and on so he can look like the grown-up in the room. But at the end of the day, Romney, Obama, both intelligent people, both look good, sound presidential, have all of that kind of right stuff. That'd be a very tough election that might have important implications for domestic policy, but if I was trying to project forward what a Romney presidency would look like in foreign policy terms, it might actually be quite similar to a second term of Obama.
And of course, while the debate tonight was focused on foreign policy, the economy has still got to be the issue that the American people are going to care about in the upcoming vote.
Yeah, it's the only issue. You know, we have all the headline statistics, but they bear repeating. 9% unemployment, 30% decline in housing prices, 30% of Americans underwater on their mortgages. Those are terrible statistics. This is an economic election. You would think that that's an election Barack Obama could not win but he's still about 50-50, I think, in terms of his chance of re-election because the Republicans are in such disarray.
And if we think that Newt Gingrich is a front runner, what are his economic credentials like?
Well, he went head-to-head with Bill Clinton in 1994 to 1996 when he was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the head of the Republican Party. And he went tough on entitlement reform. We've got to fix Social Security, the American retirement pension scheme, and we've got to fix Medicare, healthcare for aged Americans. You know, that's still where the centre of gravity for the Republicans is. Let's cut entitlements and reduce taxes. And that's the kind of line that Gingrich potentially can run more credibly than Mitt Romney. Of course, the problem the Republicans have is that Newt Gingrich lost against Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton defended the welfare state at a time when the US economy was doing well. You'd think that Barack Obama's defense of the welfare state today would be even more attractive because America is hurting economically.
And given what's been happening in the last week, is there anything significant the President can achieve between now and when the voting starts to make the American people believe he's on top of things?
Well, can he achieve anything domestically? I think even he's probably given up. You know, we just had another round of this debt negotiation in the US fail. And one of the reasons it failed was that Obama refused to give in to the Republicans. 6 months ago, he wanted to do a deal with the Republicans. I think he now thinks that's a loser. So he can't do much domestically. But ironically, of course, you know, Barack Obama was in Asia last week, including in Australia, making an incredibly important stamp on what he views American interests in the Asia-Pacific century to be about. But American voters just don't care. To the extent they care at all, they only care about the hoary old adage in American politics that unfair Chinese trade is costing American jobs. But it's that jobs word again that matters, not, you know, who's going to control the South China Sea.
There was enormous passion around the time of the last presidential election. There was a real push. Do you think there's a different sentiment this time around?
Absolutely. You know, everybody is unpopular. Barack Obama is unpopular. The Congress is even more unpopular. Barack Obama does pretty well against existing Republican candidates when they've got proper names. If it's Barack Obama against an unnamed Republican candidate, he does badly. It's a sort of lesser of two evils kind of election we're looking at because, you know, Americans, this classically confident, overconfident country, is in a state of anxiety that I think is unprecedented, actually, certainly since the Great Depression.
Interesting times ahead. Geoffrey Garrett, thanks for speaking to us.
My pleasure.